Welcome to our new segment of the KaeDee podcast series called the KaeDee Extras. Each week, either myself or David will be carrying out a solo episode where we pick an album for ourselves that we're familiar with, we turn the mic on, and we talk our shit. Alongside our regular exchanges every Tuesday, we will be dropping these extra episodes every Thursday. As usual, we appreciate you as a listener, and you can continue to show your support by following us on Twitter and Instagram at the KaeDee Exchange and subscribing to us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening. Yes, welcome back to my second solo review for this new series that we're doing on the KaeDee Exchange. Let's just cut to the chase. My album that I'm going to be talking about this time will be Me Against the World by Tupac, which is his third album in his discography. It was released in 1995 and was mainly created during 1994, after he had his first shootings when he was shot in the elevator in the studio, on his way to the studio. I think it was Quad Recording Studios in New York, and you can hear it in the intro of the album when he has the news snippets talking about him being shot and everything that was going on around that. And as well as him checking himself out of the hospital and all of that stuff. So this album was definitely made in the wake of all that. I think he also went to prison during the release. I'm not entirely sure. I do remember All Eyes on Me is the next album, which he created after signing to Death Row with Suge Knight. I think this is pre-Suge Knight. But he went to prison when this came out, I think. I mean, that's a quick overview of the album itself and its release. But, I mean, there's so much to say about Tupac himself if we want to go into giving some form of background. I think alongside names like Jay-Z and Eminem and Biggie and Kanye West and whoever else, Tupac's one of the most recognizable names in hip-hop. I think anyone coming into the genre from outside the genre knows who this guy is. There have been movies made about him, documentaries made about him, and he's another artist who unfortunately was killed quite young. We forget that he was about 24, 25, which is younger than I am now. But he, in that short space of time, lived a very, very interesting life, I would say, and a very inspiring one as well. I think what I find really interesting about Tupac and his legacy is how people who are outside the spectrum of hip hop react to him. So for someone like me, Tupac is, if this has not already been stated, is one of my favorite artists of all time. And I know it's kind of cliche for a lot of people to say, oh yeah, Tupac, my favorite rapper. Oh, I love Tupac. Nothing gets better than Tupac. There's good reason for that. I legitimately think he was a hugely inspiring guy, extremely special. And whether in the scope of hip hop, in music, and just in general as well, as someone to be studied and to understand in relation to how you conduct and live your own life. Because this guy, I mean, people always talk about him being a contradiction of sorts in his music and in his life. And what's so interesting is, like I alluded to before, people seem to have these preconceived notions of who he is, or who he was, sorry. And it's funny when I discuss him, or I show some other people materials about him, so documentaries or movies or whatever, or books, they always leave kind of surprised whether they thought they were familiar before or were completely unfamiliar and just knew his name. So, for example, I had a university lecturer who went around the room in like the first lecture that we had, or first sit down class that we had, just about 8 of us. And we all had to pick a historical figure and talk about them that we thought who had impact, and then someone who was from the 90s who had impact on us. And it went around the room, and I think I was going to pick. I wasn't sure who I was going to pick from the 90s, and then I thought of Tupac. And as I was discussing him, I didn't even have to go in with any notes or anything like that. I just kind of went off the top of my head because, again, this, if you heard my previous episode, you know about how my year before uni, or the end of my college time, and then my year off, and then going into uni was a very pivotal time for me, as it is for a lot of people. But obviously, I'm discussing my version of it. And in terms of music and understanding myself and everything like that, I remember watching the Resurrection documentary, which he made or was in the process of making, and he died before he finished it. And I think his mum completed it for him. Rest in peace to her, Afeni Shakur. And it just blew my mind like wide open. And it really showcased who Tupac was and what kind of life he lived. And it's very different to, I guess, what people assume or think on the surface. Maybe not everyone, but it left a huge impact on me. And you'll hear people quote one of the famous things he said, or put it into their music or discuss it, where he said that I might not be the one to change the world, but I guarantee you I will be, the things that I do or say, I'm kind of switching it up here. I can't remember exactly verbatim what he said. What I do or say will spark someone to create that change. So I have basically, by putting myself out there, I have set the seed. By putting my thoughts out there, by putting my life out there, someone down the line will see me and hear me and feel me and enact that change. And it's just, I've watched that documentary so many times, and I really, even now, can't put into words how much of an impact it had on me. I found it so captivating. It was like one of those movies where it follows a story, but told through clips, video clips of real life footage and narration and interviews with people to form this cohesive storyline from his younger years all the way up to his death. And it's just, yeah, there's something about the way he talks. There's something about his voice, and there's something so haunting about it as well when he says over the top, "Yeah, I got shot." Obviously referring to probably the quad recording studios shooting. But in the context of the documentary, he says it after he's fatally shot in Las Vegas. And it just adds this eeriness. You know, it's like, yeah, I got shot. I'm still alive though. And it has a completely different context, a different meaning, in that context. That he's still here through his spirit. And he clearly is, because people still talk about Tupac. They talk about the newer artists not respecting Tupac enough. And everyone knows a lot of his big songs like California Love and So Many Tears and Dear Mama and Keep Your Head Up, I Get Around, I Don't Give a Fuck, all of Hail Mary, all of this. Like, he just put out so much great material in his life, in his short life as well. But I feel like I didn't finish the university story. So basically, when I mentioned him, I spoke about him, and then we had to do a little write-up and send it in. And the lecturer was basically he was teaching us about the last 200 years of UK history. But this beginning lecture or seminar was about history in general and how it's useful. Because I joined at foundation level, which during my year off became open to international students. So obviously students who are coming over to the UK to study here. This module was to help them integrate into living in the UK. Obviously, myself and a few other people who were UK citizens had to be part of these modules as well. But it was interesting in its own right. And he emailed me back when I sent in my write up and said that he found it so interesting that he went and did his own research on Tupac, because I mentioned things about him when he was born. His mother was part of the Black Panthers and his stepdad as well. He was basically, he's been in prison when he was in his mother's womb when she went to prison because of the kind of radical things that they were doing at the time, trying to fight against injustice and racism and all of that sort of stuff. That stuff was built into him from a deeply at an early age. So it's no wonder he kind of turned out the way he did. The same thing when I watched the movie, which wasn't all that great, but I watched it with my dad and my brothers. And my dad even messaged me the next day saying, "Oh, I found him really interesting. This Tupac guy. I actually went and started looking him up myself." I feel like he has that pull on people, not just as a rapper or as an artist, but just as a personality, as a person, as a human being, basically. And what was interesting is my brothers, when we were watching that film, sometimes they would say, "Why is he acting like that? Or why is he doing that? Why is he being that way?" And it's like, what would you mean? For me, obviously, I have the context. I know about his life story. I know about how he's come up. I know about who he was. Um, I think that because he's died and because he has a lot of inspiring messages, a lot of motivational songs that people use as motivation and whatever else, um, especially posthumously, like Changes, and the song with Elton John, Ghetto Gospel. That's sorry, Ghetto Gospel. That's it. I think some people assume he was this really saintly person, but he wasn't necessarily. And he was a really conflicted person, contradictory in certain ways too. But that's just part of what made him human. He wasn't perfect, and he never tried to claim he was perfect. And this whole album is a deeper, reflective look at that. Probably his deepest, most introspective look at himself. And yeah, I mean, there's what else can I really say about Tupac, man? I mean, he just seems to have this pull, um, in terms of his humanity and whatever else. And a lot of people like to drag on Kanye because of the way he acts, but I think if Tupac was still around now, people would also hate on him. I think he would have maybe moved into the acting world. He was also an actor himself, while he was alive. He would have, I reckon he could have transitioned the Will Smith way, become an actor, moved out of music, moved into fashion. He was into that too. And you can watch old interviews where he's shouting down the mic, or he's shouting at people, and he's really letting loose with his opinions, and he's talking reckless, and he's saying just things that are on his mind and that come to his mind, and then sometimes he'll go back on it later on and whatever else. And he was a controversial guy in the same way Kanye is. Not saying that they're both the same, but there's a lot of overlap in the way they are. But you can see how, I wonder that when Kanye passes away, or if he had passed away young, I reckon people would have praised those aspects of those qualities about him. The fact that he always spoke up, the fact that he spoke his mind, and he said this and said that, and they will remember the good things. The problem is that I reckon if Tupac was alive now, they would still focus on the bad as well, which, makes sense. We do that with people. We tend to do that especially when people die, we tend to kind of look over the bad parts and only see the good. But I think in this case, it's good to look at the bad parts as well. We want the full rounded picture. We want to understand the person as a whole, and especially someone like Tupac. And especially when talking about this album, because I think it is his most introspective one. This did to me what the documentary did to me, as in the Tupac one, the Resurrection documentary. I had a cousin who loved Tupac. I don't really speak to that guy. I don't really speak to that guy anymore, but as in my cousin, but he wouldn't even let me borrow one of his books when I was really young, when we used to go visit them a lot. That was about him. That was about Tupac and his life and whatever else. But I remember him opening it up and showing me the pictures in the middle, which had pictures of him being beaten and bruised by the police, and the famous final shot of him and Shook in the car before he got shot. And but he wouldn't let me take the book, which I understand now because I've lent out books to people and not got them back, and I still just haven't replaced them because I just can't be asked. But I need to, and so I understand why, especially if he was really precious over them. I have Tupac's poetry book as well in my collection. I have Jay-Z's autobiography and things like that. I wouldn't give those things away to people just off the cuff. So I understand in hindsight, but yeah, when talking about this album had such a big impact on me in the same way Resurrection did. Those two, that combination of this album and that documentary took Tupac from just being one of those guys who's like a legend in the game and I know about, and yeah, of course he's sick. I think he's sick. I've listened to his music. It's sick. But sitting with these two projects, as in the documentary, the album, just really solidified him as someone that, you know, will forever have made such a supreme impact on me that I don't think I would be the same person I was before. I would be, sorry. I'm tripping over my words because I'm trying to put into words what this guy really means to me. Like on a big scale, this guy has had such a huge impact on me, and this album is a good way of reflecting upon that. So might as well just jump into that. So yeah, discussing the themes of this album. Like I said before, I've been saying it's probably his most introspective album that he's created. And I mean, even from Tupac himself, I think he sums it up really nicely. So I'll read a bit from it. He says that Me Against the World was really to show people that this is an art to me, that I do take it like that. And whatever mistakes I make out of ignorance, not out of disrespect to the music or the art. So Me Against the World was deep and reflective. It was like a blues record. It was down home. It was all my fears, all the things I just couldn't sleep about. Everybody thought that I was living so well and doing so good that I wanted to explain it. And it took a whole album to get it all out. It's explaining my lifestyle, who I am, my upbringing, and everything. It talks about the streets, but talks about it in a different light. There's a song on there dedicated to mothers, just a song I wrote just for my mother. And it digs deeper like that. I just wanted to make something for all mothers. I'm proud of that song. It affected a lot of people. Now, yeah, that song in particular he's talking about is called Dear Mama, and that's one of the many themes that he discusses on this album. His love and appreciation for his mother and the way they were brought up, and the lifestyle that they lived, alongside a lot of actually quite depressing themes as well. But you wouldn't think that if you were just giving it a background listen and you heard the beats. I mean, he talks about suicidal thoughts. He talks about not feeling like he's doing the right thing and being judged for it. He talks about like how his paranoia, thinking that he's a target and that he may be killed at any moment, which unfortunately ended up coming true. But then it's balanced out nicely with some other stuff as well, some more easygoing, like carefree songs, which still have some depth to them, which I've always admired his ability to do. Because the thing was with Tupac as well, he made so much music, and there's a reason there's so many posthumous albums of his, because he recorded so much music. And you hear stories from engineers all the time about how he would go in to the booth, they'd play a beat, he'd write the song, and then just bang it out, 1 or 2 takes, and that was it. He wasn't too overly meticulous, and you can even hear it in the documentary. You can hear him in the studio saying, I lay that shit down, you lot do your mix and you lot do your mix and mastering and all that sort of shit, make it sound good, and we'll put it all together at the end. And yet, for someone like that, you'd think that the music wouldn't be as deep or as strong or as captivating as it is. But it is. And I think people sometimes mischaracterize, and I've done this in the past as well, compared to other MCs, they try and they say that, Tupac wasn't much of a rapper though, it was just about the feeling. But Tupac, on this album especially, really showed that he can rap. Like, he can rap. And his lyrics did have depth. There was a technical skill about him too. Not just the pure feeling, but he could give that feeling. And I think a lot of the time it's because he wasn't too overly meticulous about how technical he was, about his delivery or anything like that. The fact that he just heard the beats, went in and created the song, it feels like he was a conduit for the ideas. He was a conduit for the lyrics, and they just come and he just channeled them through, and he just laid it down and didn't overthink it. I mean, you can hear him layering up his vocals. They're not perfect in the same way someone like Eminem's is. They're not. He's not overly technical like someone like Royce da 5'9" is. And yet there's so much passion and gravitas in the way that he delivers it, and there's something so dynamic about it that even when he's on certain beats or certain songs, you just have a good time listening until you actually listen to the lyrics and you're like, oh damn, he's really talking about some heavy shit. The fact that he could write that is just is great. It's a testament to his intrinsic artistic ability. But I think he's right when he talks about it being a blues record, even right down from the cover. The color scheme on the cover matches the music. It has that raw 90s hip hop sound with a bit of the 90s R&B sound, because the R&B tends to be influenced a lot of the time from hip hop. So the 90s hip hop at the time was influencing the sound of the 90s R&B at the time as well. Or at least that's how I've kind of seen it happen. So there's some stuff on here that just sounds really summery, upbeat, but the actual beat constructions, the musical construction of it is so raw. There's still a little bit of muddiness left in the bass to make it bang harder. The snares are really raw and sharp, and I don't know what the right word for it is, but the beats are so nicely mixed. His vocals sit in there nicely, and it's just got a great sound. It's a real epitome of the 90s sound as well, but it's very cohesive too. It's very all, you can play it from beginning to end and it doesn't sound like any of the songs don't belong on the album. But speaking of Tupac being able to rap, like from the very first song, the alliteration and everything in his verse, when at the beginning of each verse he keeps the P sound going. So they say pussy and paper is poetry, power and pistols, plotting on murdering motherfuckers before they get you, picturing pitiful punk copping fleas, puffing weed as I position myself to clock G's. My enemies scatter in suicidal situations, never to witness the wicked shit that they was facing. Pockets is packed with presidents, pursue your riches, evading the player hating tricks while hitting switches. Like he's he's really spitting like on those parts. Polish your pistols, prepare for battle past the pump. When I get to popping, people is dropping, then they done. Calling the coroner, come collect the fucking corpse. He got hit by a killer, preoccupied with being boss. Like, it's poetic, man. Like it's, and you can tell that he wrote poetry as well, because I think writing just came easy to him. And that, for the very first song, it just hits you straight away. And there's a lot of, this is something that used to happen with old school hip hop as well, is that you wouldn't always have actual choruses, like vocal choruses. There would just be the beat playing, or there'll be a DJ scratching or something like that. And that's all throughout this album. Like the themes across this whole thing, like I said before, they range from kind of playful to kind of deep and dark, but I think majority of it is quite dark. It's very, very introspective. One of my favorite songs is "So Many Tears," and it's something. It has this sample of "That Girl" by Stevie Wonder. I remember when I heard the Stevie Wonder song, I thought I've heard that before. Usually it's the other way around. That one I'd heard the Tupac song, which I love still to this day. And yeah, there's just some things that he says that are just so yeah, they really speak to the kind of mental health issues that people nowadays can still relate to, although maybe his environment or situation was different. You know, now that I'm struggling in this business by any means, label me greedy, getting green, but seldom seen. And fuck the world because I'm cursed. I'm having visions of leaving here in a hearse. God, can you feel me? Take me away from all the pressure and all the pain. Show me some happiness again. I'm going blind. I spend my time in this cell. Ain't living well. I know my destiny is hell. Where did I fail? My life is in denial. And when I die, baptized in eternal fire, shed so many tears. Like, that alone, that verse in particular, that's the second verse on So Many Tears. always makes me kind of sad, especially towards the end, because regardless of your beliefs of what happens when you leave your physical life or whatever, I've always hoped that people like Tupac got some kind of restitution. So they got some kind of peace, or they came to some form of peace or stability or comfort. Whether you believe in something happening beyond death or not. If you do, and if that's the case, I've always hoped that Tupac kind of, you know, for his short and struggle, I was about to say struggle free, but the opposite of that. For his short and kind of hectic life, for all the good that I think he was trying to do, with all the kind of the good-hearted nature at which he went about it, and the intention that he went in with, and the strong drive that he went in with, I really hope that he, and the way, the way he was killed as well. I mean, I just really hope that there was, I don't know, some restitute for that. I don't even know if that's the right word, but that he was at peace, I guess, at some point. But yeah, what's interesting as well about this album is some of the songs which have some of the influences on the songs. So Heavy in the Game, I think, which has the more Jamaican style. It's got Lady Levi, Richie Rich, Ebony Foster. Temptations is such a 90s era song, with the R&B, with the guy singing even just after his verse and everything. It's just, there's so much dynamism throughout. And then Dear Mama is one of the most beautiful hip hop songs I've heard, or just beautiful songs in general, because it's just the way, it's just so musically beautiful and lush and just low key, and it will make you think about your own mom, and think, man, I really should appreciate her more, regardless of the situation, or depending on the situation. But he just sounds like he's just talking over it. He sounds like he's almost like a little bit drunk, and he's just kind of talking to his mum and saying how he really feels. And the chorus comes in, and it's beautifully sung. I know the thing is, it's funny when you look at hip hop today. Sometimes you'll have people saying, "Man, why is this person on here singing the hook? Why is this is so soft, or this beat is soft, or this song is soft?" But I mean, Tupac was doing some of this stuff too. I mean, you have songs like "It Ain't Easy," "Can You Get Away" on here, and songs like Temptations and Dear Mama, but they're considered classic songs. And maybe it's just the way it was utilized. Everything feels in-house. Everything feels like it was collaborative. There was this unified feeling throughout the album in terms of the music and in terms of what he was talking about. Like he said in his own notes about the album, he talks about everything. It's his blues record. It's his deep, reflective, down-to-earth album. And that's covering all aspects of his psyche and how he feels. And that includes, he's always talked about the contradiction between songs like Keep Your Head Up and then I Get Around. So it's like, I can love and respect my women, but does that mean I'm not going to have any fun and party with them and whatever else? It doesn't have to necessarily be as black and white as that. And I think Tupac's always been about that. So across this album, you get that. Song like Lord Knows doesn't sound like it should have the content that it has, because again, musically, there's just something, you can put this on and people will enjoy it and not necessarily feel depressed by it. Maybe a song like So Many Tears might be a bit more low-key and on it, like kind of down in a moody sense. Dear Mama is obviously very reflective on the surface. Death Around the Corner is like outwardly quite dark as well, music-wise. But there's a lot of other songs on here where the beats don't necessarily give you if you're not listening to the lyrics, they don't give you the impression that this is a dark song. And that's what I've always liked. I like the contrast, and I like the way that his beat selection on here, I think, is almost perfect. I'll talk about my likes and dislikes, and I'll get to certain parts of that. But yeah, I mean, I think I've covered it in terms of the themes of this album. It's if you really want to know Tupac, if you want to get to know him, outside of watching that Resurrection documentary or any just good documentary about him, the movie doesn't really, I don't think, does him justice in the same way a movie like Straight Outta Compton does or 8 Mile does. I think that You'd be better off going to Resurrection, because that was, I mean, Tupac started that movie by himself. Like, as in he was overseeing that. So you could say that there is some bias in there, or whatever else. But it feels pretty, what's the word? Heart on your sleeve type thing. So he includes things, and he's very honest about including those aspects of his life. Another thing that I've always found really interesting about him, which I didn't mention in the background, is that based on what we were saying about when we watched the movie or when we talked to other people, I remember showing people at my friends at uni the Resurrection documentary, and then some of them saying, was Tupac gay? Because he was into things like ballet. Sorry, he not necessarily being a ballerina, but he was into things like ballet. He was into art and poetry, and he loved Shakespeare and all that sort of stuff. And he went to a private school. So there's all these things that you can make these misconceptions about him based on those things, but it's the other way around. People don't see that part. They see the thug life. They see the fact that he's a rapper, and that he died young and he was killed. They don't see the other aspects of his life. Not necessarily saying that he came up in privilege. I mean, it was just he was lucky and able to be accepted into those schools, I think, from my knowledge, from what I remember. And his passion lied in those places. And watching that back with other people, it's interesting how they would say, they would look at his mannerisms and his body language and be like, oh man, I wonder if Tupac was gay. And I mean, I don't know if he would be gay. I reckon he probably, if anything, he would have been bisexual. But I mean, not that it really matters or changes anything for me, but it's interesting how little people know truly about him. So I think outside of that documentary, listen to this album if you really want to get a feel for Tupac musically and as a person. The first two albums I think were kind of stepping stones towards this one. This is the first, in my opinion, full, solidified, like his strongest outing, basically. And then All Eyes on Me, another really strong outing. But that was a double album with more fun songs, party songs, and some deeper introspective songs. But he also had a lot of features on there as well. He basically made 2 discs worth of just bangers, covering the spectrum of deep, like hard-hitting hip hop, as well as some kind of fun party tunes and summer jams and all that sort of stuff. But if you really want to get to know Tupac as an individual or what he was about, then this is the album to listen to. In terms of reflecting back on it, obviously I said it made a huge impact on me when I first heard it. Reflecting back, when I listen to it now, nothing's really changed. It's not like, I used to love this album back in the day, but it's cool. It's not. If anything, it's not necessarily that it gets better, but it keeps reigniting my appreciation for him. And it takes me back to when I first heard it. It takes me back to how I was feeling. And like I said in my Eminem episode, that I was going through some mental health issues at that time. And music like this really helped me reconnect and become myself, and actually become my newer self, or at least transition into becoming that better version of myself. This album now, when I hear it, it puts me back in that mode, and kind of in a good way. So some albums will be very nostalgic and make me miss the old times. This, not necessarily. This still feels like it's part of me. So when I hear it, I don't get nostalgic in that sense. It does make me think back to that time, but I still live with the album. So when I listen to it, I feel like I'm still living with it. I'm still feeding my spirit, so to speak, with this and with what Tupac's saying. It's like he's there sitting with me, talking to me and telling me how he's feeling. So there's not necessarily, I mean, you could talk about a wider spectrum of things. So there's certain things that I maybe had biases about or didn't believe, or not even believe, but didn't understand back then, that when I hear this now, because this album's from the 90s, from 1995. I was born the year before that. So this is true for a lot of hip hop. A lot of hip hop is very problematic in its content, whether it's homophobia or misogyny and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there may be lyrics here or there from Puck that he puts down on this album that maybe I might think, no, I wouldn't say that. But off the top of my head, I can't really think of too many. Um, and I think because he was being so raw and emotional and just stating who he was as a person, you almost kind of forgive it in a sense if you do hear it. Not saying that you should forgive it in general, but you understand that Tupac's not here to apologize for things. He did apologize for things back in the day. I mean, he had a sexual assault uh, scandal where he was seen as he went to jail because I think he was prosecuted as being an accessory to a sexual assault of one of the groupies or something who was with his team. But he was involved with a team of people, this new group of people who I think they set him up, or at least people say that. And he wasn't found guilty of actually sexually assaulting anyone. He claims that he went to sleep, he woke up, and this woman who had been there for that night said that the other men there assaulted her. Now I don't know if there was like a way to prove that or not. So I think he was prosecuted for being an accessory to the crime. So he still had to do jail time as a result of that. But I don't think Tupac himself was a rapist, and he openly kept defending himself and saying that he wasn't. But I don't want this to go into a kind of was he not or anything like that. I don't think it's one of those R. Kelly type things where it's like, come on, bro, Tupac was a rapist, man. You just refuse to believe it. It's a different situation. He just was in an environment which potentially enabled it to happen, and whether he did or did not know or had any inkling about it, we don't know. I don't think. I haven't even looked into it too much, but that's something else to kind of discuss. But again, in light of that, the thing is, because Tupac's so open and was so open, you kind of, he never shied away from that. It's not like R. Kelly walking out of the interview, and I hate to bring up this comparison because I don't think that they're both comparable, but there's a difference between them. Someone like Tupac was openly discussing it and saying, this is not what happened. This is what happened. I accept my jail time and I've done it and I've served my sentence and I don't deal with these people anymore. And I'm not part of that crowd or anything like that anymore. And he moved on into other territories of his life, which may have been his downfall, but whatever else. So when I listen to this album, I don't necessarily think of that and think, oh man, some of the shit he's saying is just so outdated or anything. One, you have to kind of date it back to when it was made and put it in context like that. And because he's such an open book, you kind of see it as a dissection of him as a personality, as a human being in that moment in time. So in terms of like and dislike, or in terms of its aging and reflecting back on it, yeah, it does none of those things. Unfortunately, with a lot of 90s hip hop and even actually, unfortunately, more recent hip hop that I loved maybe a few years ago and now I listen to, like the Marshall Mathers LP2 from the last episode, the constant use of the F word or the gay slur is weird for me to hear now. I mean, even he doesn't use it, as in Eminem doesn't even use it in his newer work. But the amount it was thrown over that album, when I rap along to it, I don't say those words because it just feels weird. But yeah, and obviously we know about Eminem and some of the lyrics that he puts out there, but with Tupac it's a bit different. So I don't have that issue with this album. In terms of dislikes, if I had to put it down, if I had to take away points, I would say that the songs after Dear Mama, so It Ain't Easy and Can You Get Away, aren't my favorites, and they kind of slow down the album. They make me not really, I don't look forward to those parts of the album. And I understand why It Ain't Easy is there. It's a really important song lyrically, but I think musically it doesn't do too much for me. And I get why it's there after Dear Mama, because it kind of serves as a musical kind of lightness. It's a bit lighter and it serves as a bit of a reprieve from that. But although content wise, not so much. Can You Get Away? It's a cool, song for women or whatever. Like it's one of those. It's you almost kind of need one of those. But yeah, I mean, apparently it was about his love for Left Eye, so Lisa Left Eye Lopez, who he I think he had like a relationship with, or a certain relationship with. I mean, even I think the phone. I think there's a phone call at the beginning of the song, so it might be alluding to that because they had apparently a phone friendship. Um, but yeah, so those two aren't my favorite songs. They're important. I think I know why they're on the album. Old School grew on me. Him talking about his influences again. Every song on here, content wise, is important and serves a purpose and adds to the solidity, like how solid the album is and how cohesive it is. Not only musically, but also the fact that each song has a purpose. So even if I don't necessarily like a certain song as much as the others, I don't feel like I could take it off because then I feel like I'm taking away a part of or a piece of Tupac. And this album feels like it's meant to, I mean, it's meant to be him against the world. It's him showing off fully who he is versus as if he's in a court against the entire world and he's showing a kind of a whole kind of, I don't know, the words escaping me, but like, um, not a snapshot of who he is. But I guess you could call it that because you can't, across the whole album. I mean, he says that it took a whole album for him to get all this stuff off his chest, but I reckon that, you know, he could have just made 3 of these and still had more to say. I mean, like we said before, he made so much music that it's insane how much he had to say and how much that he was doing, as well as his poetry that he was writing too. But apart from that, I don't think there's any strong like dislikes on here at all. I still fully love this album and I'll still defend those songs because I think they're important to the overall to contribute into this body of work. And I still, you know, even lyrically, because he's such an open book, I take it as what it is. So I really appreciate that about this album, and I think it's timeless in a sense. At least for me, I can put it on still and vibe with it and be good with it. Whether it sounds dated or not, I'm not sure. I mean, if you gave someone now who listens to the newer gen of hip hop and you gave them this album, yeah, it will probably sound old, but I think that they'd be able to get with it more so than maybe some other 90s hip hop like Black Moon or something else, which is sick. Like Black Moon's Enter the Stage is one of my favorite albums in general, but I think that sounds like it's from its time and the production value is not as high. I mean, for a reason, it fits their aesthetic, but I think this one would be more accessible if you were giving it to a younger hip hop audience. And obviously, there's kind of familiarity with someone like Tupac and his name and his fame. But yeah, nothing else really more to say. I still love every aspect of this album, even if there's certain bits I don't like as much as others. This is one of the most solid bodies of work, in my opinion, in hip hop and in music in general. So yeah, final thoughts. I feel like I probably missed a lot out. I kind of did this way less prepared than I did the last one because I kind of just went in off the cuff, no script or anything like that. The first half of the last episode had more pointers and was a bit more scripted, but this one not so much. I also left it to the last minute because I'm an idiot. But there's so much to say about Tupac. There's so much to say about his influence on me and his impact on me, and not just on me, but on people in general. And you know, I still get goosebumps thinking about when they did the hologram of him on stage with Snoop Dogg, and just that he wasn't actually there, but his image was there, and it was so recognizable, and his voice was playing through those speakers, and he was there performing, but he wasn't physically there. And just there's something about this guy that really strikes a nerve for people, and I understand why. I know people like doing the whole Biggie versus Tupac thing, but for me, I don't even see them as comparable. But my final thoughts, love this album. I still do to this day. And if you truly want a full-rounded understanding of and dissection of Tupac and his personality and what he stood for and who he was and how he was feeling, which was not great all the time. Like, let's not get this twisted. Like, he was hella famous. Watch the documentary. He was going to parties and stuff. He was doing all that kind of stuff. I mean, he was going to parties as himself. He wasn't in disguise or anything like that. And we're talking about Tupac. You see him at times walking just down, can't remember what it's called, but one of the beaches in LA. It's a famous one as well. He's just walking down there with the interviewer. And it's like, you're just walking out there like you're just a normal guy. And he talks about going to parties and people were like, yo, that's Tupac. And he's just like, yeah, he's just there having a good time. He's with the people and he was for the people and he truly embodied that. And he was an open book. He wore his heart on his sleeve. And yeah, there's not many other people who I am just thankful for existing. In the same way that I'm thankful for someone like Michael Jackson for existing and just having such a huge impact on my life. And every now and then just thinking, wow, that guy actually was here and made an impact like that and did those things. Someone like Tupac, it's the same thing. And so I would suggest watching the Resurrection documentary. But if you're going to keep it to music, definitely listen to this album as a whole, beginning to end. Vibe with it and listen to him. Listen to Tupac from his very own words, what he's saying. And hopefully you can take away from it what I also took away from it and still continue to take away from it to this day. This is one of my favorite albums ever in hip hop. One of the most powerful albums in my opinion too. And Tupac's one of the most powerful guys, I think, just in my opinion, in history. I cannot overstate my love for this guy. And I think I must have said the word impact so many times, so I'm not going to say it again. But yeah, Tupac, Me Against the World, impeccable album.